Recording. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Bring Your Own Bagel morning chat. And my name is Larendee Roos, and I am the CEO and founder of Roos Advisors, a consulting, coaching, and recruiting firm in New York City with offices also in New Jersey, Salt Lake City, Utah, Atlanta, soon to be Europe, and Los Angeles. And we do this Bring Your Own Bagel chat every other Thursday morning, 8:30, where we speak with thought leaders, CEOs, hiring officials about this thing called employees. These people called employees and this thing called work, really. And I'm really so excited to have Chris with us this morning. And Chris Salboudis is the CEO and founder of Philo4Thought. And she is going to be sharing about her diverse path and background, which was the impetus for creating Philo4Thought, the Hellenic Mentoring Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization providing youth and with college and career mentoring programs. And her organization has facilitated live programs and events at schools, churches, small group settings. And she is going to this morning be sharing a little bit more about her own career path and her educational path and what led her to this passion that she has, this wonderful organization. And she's going to share some techniques that she has found valuable in hiring, training, and mentoring staff, including volunteers, which is an avenue that is also can be very challenging, but she's navigated those waters so beautifully. And so we're going to learn from her about that. And then she's also going to share how the current COVID environment has affected her abilities to adapt and deliver quality education as a professor in another one of her many talents. So Chris, welcome to our gathering this morning. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Larendee. I think I owed you one after you spoke at our event in the spring. So I thank you very much. I hope I'll do you as much justice as you did for our event as well.
Of course, it was such my pleasure and such my honor. And Chris, we met about a year ago. It'll be a year ago, I believe, October, November, at a real estate networking event in the city. And as you know, real estate is the industry that I kind of grew up in the corporate world. And very often people think about real estate that are not right in the industry as these agents who, you know, run around and show buildings and houses. And really it's such a deeper conversation industry that not only, you know, not an industry that's just about that, but really also about growing and developing really stealth teams. So thank you so much for being a part of this again. And a question we didn't really talk about, but I would love for you to kind of share about what inspired you to attend that event where we met, that was, you know, this networking event. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So basically, Anthony told me about it, and he knew I had several young professionals in my network who were coming in for training with pitch decks, with promotion, marketing, branding, that sort of thing. And I told them about it. So anybody who was in the legal industry related to real estate, anyone who was in financing, etc., related to the real estate environment, I asked them to go because we had free passes. Anthony was amazing and gave Philo4Thought, I think, a dozen free or 20 free passes, which was perfect. He asked me how many people from your group would be interested. I said, I think I have 12. And of course, the Greek way, he gives me double. So that was great. And then I personally attended because, you know, you can't just live in a vacuum and believe what you believe and teach what you're teaching. You have to constantly, as an instructor, also learn, be open to learn. So I wanted to hear what the other kids are saying on the playground, right? So I got to meet a lot of amazing people, and most of it was basically in agreement with what I was teaching, but it's good to make sure that you're on top of the new trends, that you know what's going on. There actually was an interesting group from Yelp, and I didn't realize the different ways that Yelp could have been used. but there were people from Property Shark and from a bunch of different law firms that I had been affiliated with in the past who were using approaches that I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And I love how you bring up education, because Roos Advisors is also an education firm. So we use a lot of education. So again, really so grateful that you're with us today. So Chris, in the last 10 years, what changes or shifts in skills, capabilities, or attitudes have you noticed in the workplace?
Well, it's not so much that there are new things, but that the ability of how we're using different things has shifted. So I remember when I first started going into the administrative aspect of education, I had a supervisor who told me you have to be present and that appearance is everything. And so if you don't appear to be trendy and etc., your program won't fly.
Mm.
And he used different terminology that I didn't appreciate at the time, but I kind of think I understand now, because he told me you have to make your program more sexy. And I said, what do you
Mm-hmm.
mean sexy? It's an educational program. We're teaching kids, like, don't be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I think what he was talking about is more what we call today optics. So right now what we're doing when we post something, we make sure the optics are consistent. We make sure the optics are in line with the mission, the look, the feel, the personality of the institution that we're working for. And anything that isn't consistent with those optics, we kind of leave out or put to the side or put up temporarily, just so that we continue to make a good first impression.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I connect with what you spoke about was what are our optics,
Mm.
and I believe that's true also in the workplace, and as as companies are trying to attract high quality talent, that our perception is important, our optics are important, and hopefully we've done the work to really figure out what our mission is, what our goals are. Chris, we work with a lot of companies that have been in business for 20 years that maybe did that work when they first opened, or maybe they didn't, but even if they did, they kind of put it on in the drawer, hung it on a wall, and haven't really revisited it. And it's been our experience that it needs to be freshened up. You talked about trends and knowing what the trends are. We're always evolving human beings, and so it would go to say that so are others around us. So how we did things 20 years ago, our optics 20 years ago probably aren't going to be the same as they are today. So how have you yourself and other leaders that you've been walking with within your organization, both on the education front, but then also in your nonprofit work, how have you and other leaders responded to these changes yourselves?
So I guess there are different approaches to how you're going to seek improvement or how you're going to cope based on what you're already doing. So for example, in my nonprofit and in my classwork, I really, really embrace transparency. So that's a major thing. And it helps build trust from the beginning, so that way when there's a snag, whatever the snag is, you have more potential for resilience. So
Mm-hmm.
really a core value that we have at Philo4Thought, but then also in my teaching principles, that's part of what we're doing. And in teaching, I always have sort of Aristotle in the back of my head. So Aristotle has a principle of ethos, logos, pathos. So basically the triad of how to succeed, to understand your audience, to understand your goal, and then proceed with a logical path.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really, I think, the key to everything. I know other leaders are doing differently, but and also the other thing is to live in affirmation, to act and think in affirmative ways rather than in desperate ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I look and I'll feel a moment of panic because I don't know how to use the new tech, and then I'll call IT and I say, okay, I need to talk to this, and this person, right? So I have my go-to people at St. John's, my go-to people at Columbia, my go-to people at Philo4Thought. And I thank God for them because they've been our heroes this semester particularly. And moving forward, I think that's going to continue to be the case. We're going to have to work in tandem with them rather than just creating course modules and course shells and proceeding in a solitary fashion the way we did.
It's so true. Technology has been it's not even a field unto itself. It is part of our ethos now, isn't it? That
sure.
It's in the business world and in our personal lives, in nonprofit organizations, that it's not a department over there. It really is a part of who we are, everything that we do. And I personally, when, technology was something that I was a bit afraid of, and 20 plus years ago, I was asked to be on a team who developed an operating platform for our industry. And I remember sitting in the room with the programmers for the product and feeling a lot like a fish out of water, but also it really tested my flexibility, like you just talked about, my adaptability to look at things from a different perspective, because we had a big project that was going to change everything for our business, and we had to come together and learn and listen. So I have such deep respect, for people who have made technology their path and that are willing to improve the lives of all of us. And we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what's really possible for us. So thank you so much. Chris, tell me a little bit more about, you talked about Aristotle, and can you give me an example of where that triad in real life comes into effect for a business owner, how that could really play out?
So it's part of everything. It's part of everything. It's what it is a way of questioning. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I wake up in the morning and why am I doing this? What's my purpose? So if you work, actually, this is part of a discussion that you had, you and Bruce, I forget which of you was talking about it in an earlier session that you hosted about living a purposeful, meaningful life. So Aristotle is all about purpose. And so all of his different writings teach you to come closer and closer to questioning yourself, so that once you understand yourself, really, that's the key to everything. So then you understand and you can function on autopilot. And when part of your life can be functional on autopilot because you already know your purpose for these things, you can then focus on immediate challenges. So it makes life a little bit more bearable. A lot of people tell me, oh, how come you're smiling and everything is falling apart? I said, it's not falling apart. If you look here, we could fix this. And if you look there, we could try to do this and see what happens. But, I know my job. My job is to come in and try to fix a problem, or to come in and be the positive, the affirming, person. I'll tell you, it takes a lot of caffeine.
Okay, fantastic.
But yeah, that's basically it. So Aristotle, the questioning process is basically what that is.
What an incredible, powerful freedom statement. Live close to the question. I really resonate with that. I also appreciate what you said about as you know your purpose and you continue to maybe even potentially live close to the question, and that it gives you the confidence so that you're willing to live close to the question. I spent most of my life because of my early upbringing feeling like I needed to know all the answers, because there was a certain mantra that I grew up with that I don't know was not an acceptable answer. And so it did very often shut me down to exploration, because I believed I needed to have an answer. And so I was very often willing to live with the first answer that popped into my thought. And I've since learned that that's not always in my best interest, nor the best interest of my teams. So I'm going to take that away from our conversation today. Live close to the question. It's really powerful. Thanks, Chris. So one of the key characteristics for successful employees that we've experienced is that curiosity. And I imagine in education, it must be the same, it must be similar, right? Because we hopefully continue our education, whether it's from high school to college, college to a master's or a PhD, and then continuous education. I would think that curiosity is key and core and fundamental to that. Other traits that you have found with successful lifelong learners that have made them successful as learners, and then how they go out into the world?
Well, taking the time in general to understand what your strengths are and understand what your weaknesses are, either on a conscious level or on a subconscious level, those actually form the decisions that you make and the people who you attract into your life. Not in a big spiritual sense, but yes, in a spiritual sense also. However, in a practical sense, you understand that because your strengths are in X, Y, and Z, you don't really need the extra person who has that strength on your team. You need somebody who is going to be able to address issues that you can't address because that's not your strength, you know? Once you've been able to embrace both your positives and your negatives, and you promote that kind of culture within your team, the team as a whole moves as a stronger unit and progresses much more fluidly and transparently.
Mm-hmm. So it's looking at my capabilities as a leader, and then what I like to call hiring up. So hiring and bringing team members onto my team, especially those that I'm going to be throughout the organization, but especially those that are going to be around the table I'm sitting around to make decisions. And then if I can demonstrate my openness and my willingness, and not just that, but the requirement that I need you to be able to freely speak up about what I don't know about. It's one of the reasons I brought you in. And then if you can do that with your rank and file, and they can do that with their rank and file, then we really can have, I think, a really interesting and powerful organization, it would seem.
Yes, I have a conversation with one of my team members regularly, because I say, look, you have to take this task on because you're the charismatic one. And he'll tell me, no, you're charismatic. And I say, I can try to be charismatic. That's not the point. But the point is you excel at that. So that's your, you need to fly with it, go. And in 2 seconds, he's able to do something that would take me days of mapping and planning and ethos, logos, pathos to really try out, you know.
So amazing. So transitioning a little bit, but not so much maybe. So you just talked about giving assignments and challenges to different members of your team. How do you get engagement from the members on your team? What are some of the daily things that you do to encourage an engaged team?
Well, I mean, part of it is that not all the teams that I work with engage daily. So we sort of schedule some aspects of our meetings, our monthly get-togethers, our weekly team meetings, etc. However, there are also individual messages, which social media has helped a little bit with the direct message like that. I think the combination, but what makes it easy, it wouldn't work if we didn't know each other and if we weren't clear with each other about, okay, I'm always going to call you for these things because you're the one on the team who knows how to do these things. So then perhaps they don't mind, okay? And also the acknowledgement that for the Philo4Thought team especially, we're all very busy individuals doing other things professionally, and we're working this pro bono. So it's something that you have to really allow more time. You know, it's time and space, understanding, empathy for each other, and again, transparency. It's the word that's going to keep coming up. It's the biggest trending thing right now, besides technology, is trying to get everyone on board, trying to be clear, etc. And the other thing is they're doing something that they want to be doing. So the recognition of that helps a lot. If we were pushing someone, you see sometimes that there's a team member who they've met their capacity, but then that's it. And you have to have the the exit discussion, the exit interview, as it were, and chat with them and say, look, no hard feelings, but I know that you just took on a new job, you just started your own company, you just got married, whatever the situation is, would you like to take on less responsibility this coming year?
Mm-hmm.
And then they return sometimes if it suits their schedule, but they don't feel the pressure of being on a team when they don't have the material time to dedicate, because you lose sight of yourself and your functionality, you can't really function within a team either.
I love how you talked about that for Philo4Thought, and very often in the business world and corporate world, it can be the same discussion. Because, Bruce and I did a webinar this week on succession planning. And we really believe that succession planning begins the moment that employee walks in the door, because we don't know what life's going to bring for ourselves. How could we presume that we know what it's going to provide for that other person? Also, being really keyed into the needs and desires of that employee, that team member, even a business partner, and really having, like you said, transparent, open discussions can be a really sustaining, and I think almost a requirement for any business organization today, to have that open dialogue from a place of helping that person find their path, so that the more aligned they are along the way, then it really becomes a collaborative, contributive environment for everyone. So, and I think also, and I really appreciate how you brought in the nonprofit aspect, because I'm also the board president for a nonprofit, and there are weeks when I feel really stretched. And so I think being able to have that transparent conversation with other board members is also really valuable. I'm going to take that away from our conversation today. And that's something that I could do a better job of too, is that transparency of, here's what's coming up for me this week, and I won't be able to do as much this week, but when we're all working together, then it's fine that temporarily for maybe a week I have to step back. If I have to step back week after week, then it's probably time to reevaluate. So really powerful. And as employees and team members and contributors, I think it's also important to have an environment where we can freely speak about that. So how have you created open dialogue environments in the education field? I don't work in collegiate education, so it's not something I have a lot of visibility into. From an outsider's view, it's appeared to be a bit hierarchical, tenured. So is that changing? Is that completely inaccurate? How do you bring this same kind of ethos into that? Because you've worked not only as a professor, but also in administration and education. So tell me a little bit more about that.
So I'll tell you something, there are two different answers to that, because as a teacher, you're in the trenches with the students, you're seeing day to day what their needs are, and then you're either dealing with them directly or you're reporting to the administrator who can actually help the student more, or like whatever service that you have to direct the student to. But in terms of content development, there are, of course, hierarchical things that you have to make sure that you have to work with IT, as I said before, you have to work with your department chair, you have to work with all of these different administrators to make sure that you're following the latest policies and protocols, etc. Then as a college administrator, that's a different setting. So of course there's more hierarchy above and around you, and you have to think in terms of managing up and also managing across. I don't know if that's a term, make it a term. But you have to be able to manage and do it in a friendly way. You have to not be the boss. You have to be able to lead people without being the boss. And I had the blessing to learn that from my supervisors, who are in fact very gracious supervisors, in both at St. John's and also at Columbia. And the thing is, I've learned so much from both of them because I've had the time to do it. I've worked with them for years. Actually, St. John's, I knew them even when I was a student. I knew the same group. And so I sort of worked with them and understood as a student. And maybe that's what contributed to what I called before the need to keep learning, to keep being open to that. Because I always listen. I always go and ask, okay, I'm doing this. Is there something new that I should be trying? Like now we have this pandemic. What's the policy now, right now? And, you know, in the fall, it's going to be a little bit chaotic, you know, but we'll muddle through. And hopefully if we're all, you know, wise and thinking a couple of steps ahead, we'll reach out to the students early August instead of waiting to the last minute when the semester starts, which is going to be in late August instead of September, so that we can make accommodations for the new online features.
Mm-hmm. So how do you see, you know, as we continue forward on this new journey that COVID provided for us, because most of us, you know, most of the thought leaders I speak with and you know, leaders and heads of organizations who finally have realized we're not going back anywhere. On a very practical spiritual level, we never go back anyway. There's no such thing as backwards. As we continue on this journey that COVID provided this environment for, how do you see employees, team members, how do you see them engaging differently than maybe they were, you know, last year? Any thoughts about that?
There's definitely going to be more screen time instead of face-to-face. So I know that's bothering our dear friend Anthony from the New York network group, because motto has always been nothing replaces a handshake. So I agree, for the most part, that's very Greek. We're going to sit down and have a coffee. We're going to sit down. We're going to have a sit down, you know, and look face to face. Before most meetings, before most agreements, etc., people meet up just so they can see you and kind of read your expressions and get to know you a little bit. So that's transitioning to screen time or more email or additional texting. So it's I guess it has its positive potential, but also it's frustrating to people who still aren't used to the screen time. It's going to favor the younger generation who's been doing this anyway, because they're all Snapchat and Instagram, all this. They already know how to tell their stories online. Whereas the people who aren't college age or new grads, they're going to need a little more adjustment time. Or maybe start working with younger people so you can get a feel for it and see through their eyes how to make the thing work.
It's also been my limited experience that even the younger generation who were very savvy with applications, this is requiring a different game to a certain extent, because it's not just about a device now. It's about that there's a human I need to connect with, because there's goals and objectives that we need to reach. And if I'm not in the same room with you, how can I connect with you in a way that I'm going to pick up on cues from you besides just facial, that will help move conversations along, help me feel safe so that I can be transparent. And this is something that even those who are technologically more savvy with apps, it's still a new journey, isn't it?
So to address that portion, I do talk to a lot of people who are currently students in college, and they have experienced a lot of stress. So I've spoken to the teachers who are stressed because they don't know how to use Blackboard or WebCT or whatever platform the university has provided them. But the students are also feeling it, because whereas like children have a different language for dealing with each other versus for dealing with their parents, you know, and that carries forward also to the language they use for their teachers. And they understand their teacher is going to be a little bit hokey compared to them and their friends. They have their inside jokes where they snicker or whatever. Now, all my students are probably going, no, we don't do that. But it's okay, it's fine, you know. The thing is, they have a new language for just their teachers, their interaction with their teachers. And that breaks down a little bit when you have something like the abrupt shift from face-to-face learning all the way to online learning, because it's two completely different universes. And that's caused stress not only for the students, but also for the instructors for different reasons. And it's not that instructors are lazy or not trying, but they just don't know how to transition all their resources. Like, how do you take a textbook and all of a sudden put it into the computer when you know that in class you would just maybe Xerox the chapter and distribute it to the students who you know didn't all buy the book, right? Fine. But face-to-face, you're not maybe able to do the same thing because now it's online, there are restrictions, etc. It's a little different. It's causing stress from different factors. Also, a lot of people are apprehensive about voicing their opinions online because now it's in print and it's there online, or something is pre-recorded and then uploaded. But what if someone misunderstands? You know, I've been there, and fortunately I was able to test that out years ago when we first started online instruction, and I was basically part of the test group to start online instruction. So I had a lot of great mentors at Pace University and St. John's University saying, hey, we have this new resource, do you want to try it? And I said, sure, why not? You know, let's try it, let's see what happens. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And the things that have worked so far are part of my class. And the things that haven't worked, I'm still tinkering because I'm going to need some new material for the fall.
You spoke about the language of the students, and it brings to my mind that this thing we call the generation gap, it usually is based on lack of communication understanding. And it encouraged me to reconsider again, taking a little more time to seek first to understand, then to be understood, and try to understand the language of my younger counterparts, that they don't communicate in the same way. My daughter-in-law will tell me, you know, I'll send her a text and she'll say, do you know what that acronym that you used in that text really means? And I'll say, no. And then she'll tell me the subtext of what it means now. And certainly communication and language has changed, has nuanced, you know, since I was 25. And so I think that's also a great recommendation, Chris, that, you know, what would it take for us as leaders who've been a little bit more experienced or a little bit older? Really, how much would it take for us to invite a conversation around? So tell me about, you know, how you express a certain thought or principle. What language do you use to express that? Could be really helpful in organizations.
True. The other thing that we have to allow ourselves the mental space to do. So now, because everything's online, people think you can do things more quickly or more instantaneously, and that's really not the case, because the neuronal synapses, my boss at Columbia is going to be really proud of me now for using that. My neuronal synapses react at the same pace whether I'm doing something online or whether I'm doing something in front of me, you know. So it's just kind of, it's something that really we need to allow ourselves the mental space to think, to process, to find information that we feel is satisfactory, especially now where a lot of things are not really accredited answers. They're just whatever happens to be posted online. And so it's very important to get valid sources, valid information that has the backing of a good center or organization or author, you know. That's we want to try to avoid falling into logical fallacies and things that people presume too easily to be true. Something that you said earlier about having the answer because it was like the first answer. We all kind of do that to some extent. That's the answer. Oh, that has to be the answer. And it's not the right answer. But we only know either by trial and failure or trial and success, or we know that because we've seen other people try the thing and seen it succeed or seen it part. Yeah, so we have to leave ourselves, that's something that only gets resolved if we leave ourselves enough space to process. And if we continue, like I guess September, not September. Yes, September is going to be a little bit less chaotic than February, right? Because
Mhm.
we were all hustling straight to the online platforms. We were all hustling to create flex schedules and work at home schedules and masks and whatnot. And the panic was just everywhere. I think the summertime is going to give us that time we need to process so that in September we'll proceed a little bit more smoothly and hopefully very smoothly so that people don't panic. Because I know the group that just graduated high school, the class of 2020 from high school, transitioning into college, they're kind of nervous because they don't know they don't know what to expect. They
Mhm.
kind of know what to expect if they have older siblings or if they've been on the campus prior to the COVID breakout. But you know, it's different when you sit in that peace circle, that safe space, and talk to your advisor on like freshman orientation, and when you do all the hokey stuff that we all rolled our eyes back then, and
Mhm.
you know, appreciate now when we're leading groups through those circles. Um, it's the kind of thing that this group I think is going to miss, but hopefully advisors will find different ways to adapt so that they can have some kind of college experience in their first year.
Thank you. I want to also highlight something that you talked about that I think is mission critical for any organization, and that's that we've become very often, especially if we don't have specific intention to not become this, we become companies where communication just happens via email
Oh,
more than it does around tables and around discussion groups. And what can often happen, like you talked about it, a question comes in, I rapid fire response because there's this need that I got to clear my inbox, you know, got to get it off my plate. And it does, even having a protocol around when's an acceptable time for someone to expect a response to an email. It doesn't need to be in the next 5 minutes. In fact, probably would be good to read the email, ponder it for a minute, then respond. Remember back in the day, Chris, the email, we were so glad when it came to be because it was a way to deliver documents.
yes.
It was never meant to be the primary mode of communication. It was just to deliver documents. And part of it was because the speeds by which it could take you 3 minutes to deliver a document, right? To upload a file and
It's
send it. If you remember, you could hear the modem, you know, doing its work. So it's I think there's, you know, having standards and protocols around what is email used for, what is it not used for, and so forth. So one final question as we're coming, gosh, the time has flown, Chris. One final question for you. So in your experience, what have been 2 or 3 early indicators of team member success for you? When you look back and say, I knew, you know, within the first few days or week or so, or maybe when I interviewed that person, that this person had a pretty high likelihood that they were going to integrate with the team and be successful. What were some of those indicators that you recognized and have learned to come to kind of look for?
I mean, it differs. It differs between the person and how they were recruited and what their purpose on the team is. But I always encourage people to bring their own voice to the table. And of course, the newer people will say, sure, and then sit quietly at the table. So you don't really know how connected they are or how invested they are becoming into the group until they feel comfortable setting that coffee cup down and sharing the thought that's in their head, even if it's a simple thought, even if I don't agree, but it's something that I have to consciously remind people, look, not just because I'm leading this doesn't mean that everybody just has to nod and agree with what I'm saying. I want to hear a feedback, otherwise there would be no need for a team. I would just do it by myself, which I don't. I do it with a very remarkable team.
Mm-hmm.
But in Philo4Thought, I guess there are measurable milestones like learning how to do a report the correct way, submitting things to the correct offices because we know when we've grown together and we know when the deadlines are, and we know also how to read each other's schedules and stuff. There's an expression, I won't tell you the Greek, in the English translation, it's basically, I have to be able to trust you with my eyes closed. So even if I'm working even if I'm teaching my class and you're doing this task, or even if I'm working at Columbia and you're doing this task, I have to be able to know that with my eyes closed, you're still going to stay on target, you're going to stay on track, you're going to stay on mission, and you're going to represent the group properly, and you're going to do the thing that you have to do. And I'm fortunate to be able to do that with all my team members. Like that's a given. And the community has grown to know us, so that's another positive indicator. So once someone sees someone from the team and says, "Hey, how are you?" and they start talking, there's a gift in that, you know, the familiarity. Also a gift in not being too familiar, which my daughter reminded me the last time we canvassed for something. I walked into one of my favorite spots in Astoria, and my daughter had a pile of flyers, and I had like 20, maybe 25 flyers. I walked in, how are you? And I started talking, and then I left the store, and I see my daughter's 3 blocks down and waving at me, and I was like, oh, let me catch up. And I look, and I'm passing all the storefronts on my way to her, and I see she put the flyer up, everything. And I looked at her, I said, "How did you do that, Zoe?" So she tells me, "Well, Mom, while you're asking them about their children and grandchildren and their college plan and all this, I'm just telling them, look, we have a youth program. Can you put this in the window?" Right? And they know my face because it's your face. So she soared with that one. It was a learning moment for me, but I like to take my time and, you know, and say hi to the people who have supported us, who are, you know, dear friends at this point, you know. But it's funny how the young generation is like, okay, move, keep moving. I have 2 seconds, take it or don't take it. All right, go. You know, she's remarkable. And on the other hand is, you know, my quiet child who's a little bit more like me and always thinking and trying to, you know, get the questions and how are you, and asking those, you know, those questions that are more intuitive to him to ask. So it's just kind of funny.
That's so interesting. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. We're going to be sharing this across all of our channels. We do a lot of work in the education field as well as the real estate industry. And you gave us so many incredible things to think about that are cross-generational, cross-ethnic, cross-platform. So thank you so much for the generosity of your time today. And just, you know, the best of the best for everything that you're doing to be such a light in our world. We're so appreciative. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Larendee, and thanks for the opportunity for letting us chat here on your platform. It's really remarkable, all the things that you're doing, and I look forward to continuing to share the Bring Your Own Bagel career chats with my team and with our network as well.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye-bye.